Hello, everybody. Ben's not here this week, so let me do the what up, what up, what up. You guys got to tell me how I did there, if it was any good or not. You can tell me if it wasn't, that's fine. But my name is Tim Daniel. Normally his name is Ben Brown, but he is out being dad of athletes as they are all traveling the country right now. Isaac's on his way to West Virginia for football camp. And this is Late Night Reds here on the Riverfront Media, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm very excited after a great weekend. The Cincinnati Reds get 2 out of 3 at Wrigley Field, the friendly confines from the Cubbies. So we're going to get into that, talk about that, kind of a couple players' performances I want to touch on. And then I'm going to round the show out with my pre-recorded interview I did on Thursday with John Sadak, of course, the TV voice of Cincinnati Reds. John and I dive into a lot of stuff. Now, of course, like I said, so this is before the Cubs series, so some of the conversation may be a little predated, but I did my best to make sure anything we talked about, because we were working around John's schedule, was fitting for the conversation we were going to have that aired during the show. But so we got a pretty active chat already to start tonight. We got Carrie on here. Carrie, shout out Carrie, came in. It was already giving us a lot of fun topics before I even got the show started today. So, Carrie, I'm excited to get all through all this stuff with you. We got my good friend Dave in here. David hanging out. We've got Joey Gaditza. Josh Beckley is here every Sunday. Always appreciated. If this is your first time checking us out here at Late Night Reds or the Riverfront on YouTube, be sure to give us a quick check-in to give us a nice solid subscription. It goes a long way to help us, obviously, in the algorithm. And don't forget, July 6th, if you're in town, come hang out with us at Smoke Justice in Covington before Reds versus Tigers. It's going to be a fun Saturday where we're going to be there drinking some delicious bourbon, eating some delicious smoked food, and talking some Reds baseball. So we're excited to have you guys out there. As always, this would not be possible without our wonderful friends at patreon.com/RiverfrontCincy, where just for a couple bucks a month, you can also become a member and hang out with us and chat about the Redlegs all day, every day. But let's get into it. Go away, Cubs, go. Hey, Chicago, what do you say? The Cubs are going to choke today. Am I right, folks? Yeah. All right. Let's go through this. Friday, obviously, what a crazy game. They start down 2-0. Ian Happ does what Ian Happ does against the Reds. I guess against the NL Central from what was broken down during the broadcast, and hits a 2-run homer. The Reds battle back. The Cubs take the lead again. And then Santiago Espinal pinch hit homer was huge, humongous. I think that was his first pinch hit homer of his career. I could be wrong there, but that was unbelievable. And then to end the game in the 9th, when Alexis Diaz was really struggling to kind of get across, I saw there were some comments about him earlier. I definitely want to touch on that. Jacob Hurtubise and Ellie and Tyler Stevenson combined for an unreal relay to get the play at the plate. That was just awesome. Carrie, yeah, Espinal is worthy of considering keeping. I agree. I definitely agree. That's going to be a conversation that's going to have to be had when it comes to all these people who are coming back from suspension or the IL. Let's get to Saturday. Folks, I'm going to be 100 on with you here. I think that if Saturday was not on Fox, they would not have played that game. You could see by how the field was, you could see that it was not necessarily great playing field to be on, with how rainy it was. And it was just, especially with a brick wall behind poison ivy hanging off there in that weather, didn't seem worth it. But I guess since it was a national game, they had to keep it going. But whatever. So the Reds lose 7-5. They start off the game. They're up 4-0. Hunter struggles for an inning. Sai Suzuki bites them with the grand slam. And then they have a little bit of a little bit more of a battle. DSP Swanson hits a homer. They lose 7-5. Yeah, Carrie, absolutely. Saturday Fox, probably a money deal. It definitely was a money deal there for sure. And then let's talk about today. It was mentioned quite a bit these last few series, right? That they had struggled in rubber matches, and they had lost their last 8 rubber matches. So when a series is tied going to the final game, and they took care of business today. Nick Lodolo, 6 innings. Great. Excellent. TJ Friedl starts booming, hits a nice 3-run homer to get them going. It was awesome. Yeah. What's up, Steve? By the way, I'm going to be on Steve's show tomorrow morning on Locked On Reds. So if you guys are hanging out, be sure to catch us over there as well. We're doing a little bit of a hangout, so I'm filling in for my podcast twin, Jeff Carr, over there. So, man, just a great weekend, a much needed weekend. I know the Cubs have been slumping a little bit. So I wanted to kind of go through a couple things when I look at this big picture. And I think where we're at with this ball club now. So May's over. We got through May. 9-18 is terrible, right? That was awful. But I don't think this team is not sitting necessarily. I don't think they're not sitting pretty. I guess that's terrible English by me. A couple more of these bourbons, and we'll see how this goes. But 26-33, 10 out is obviously worrisome. That's not ideal. I know everyone's going to look at the wild card. Everyone under the sun is within reach of the wild card. The Reds are 2.5 out of the wild card going into tonight. Run differential is -7. It's second best in the division behind Milwaukee. I understand that the Brewers are obviously unreal. I just don't know if that's going to last. I don't know how it lasts. I don't know what freaky juju virus that they have that just keeps them going and always good no matter what they do, but I'm sick of it. MLB.com also has the expected win-loss record, which is kind of takes into account of how you've played throughout the year and the games you've won and lost. And they say right now the Reds should obviously doesn't mean anything, but should be 29-30. And that could come down to the bullpen or bad at bats and all these things. So I think this team's going into a June where obviously they have all these divisional games, so that plays a huge part in what they can do. You have this Rocky series coming up. You have the Red Sox who are 30-30, who haven't been very good. So June's your chance to make up a lot of these games, and that's pretty crazy. So, and yeah, right here, Nick brings it up. They've won 6 of the last 9, and they've won their two of their last 3 series. I know the Cardinal series was a bummer because it was right in the middle of the Dodgers sweep in this one, and they realistically probably could have won one of those games at least. I know Andrew Abbott had a start that wasn't ideal, but I'm not going to necessarily throw him under the bus with how great he's been. And I think that it's just kind of been one of those things where this is kind of, I don't think they're far off. I think as we get all these guys back, I think as the roster kind of turns over, obviously you want to get some guys hitting again, which we'll talk about for sure. And your rotation's been as solid as it can be. It's awesome. So I'm really, really happy. Nick was at the 2 games they lost. So, man, I've been there, dude. So last year, the 12-game win streak, I went to hopefully game 13 against Atlanta. It was the night after the Ellie Cycle game. And it was not fun. So I've been there, man. Let's kind of go through some comments before I get into a few other things. So Carrie, like I said, brought up a lot of stuff. Feels like TJ is back, bringing the vibes back to the team. Just need Ellie and Benson to keep going. That was a huge game from TJ Friedl. I loved how he spoke in his post-game interview. When Steve Offenbaker was on a couple weeks ago, we talked about TJ particularly was last year the best he's ever going to be. And it's very possible. I'm not going to count that out by any stretch of the matter. But I will say that having him just kind of legitimizes the lineup a little more, right? It just feels like when you see him in the number 1 spot and everything kind of falls into place after him, it just changes the dynamic of the team, especially considering all the guys who are playing in the outfield and getting at bats and weren't necessarily ideal. I know there's a very big Stuart Fairchild battle right now. I think in the role he's supposed to be in, he's very good. And the role he had to be in with all the Reds injuries, he was not ideal in, obviously. But I completely agree. Having TJ back means so much. Now, as far as Will Benson, Ellie De La Cruz, we'll definitely get into Ellie. I want to talk about that a lot. She says right here, even though Ellie didn't produce much at bats, he did so on defense. Boom. 2 huge plays this weekend. Those were awesome. Stuchow is a keeper. Carrie. All right. I like this. I like this conversation. So she's just there sitting there getting all their thoughts in ahead of time. And yeah, it comes back to when Pecan goes back, who goes down. Alex Young got sent down today. That was kind of shocking. CES back pretty soon. So there's a lot to kind of look forward to. Dave says, everyone loves Alexis Diaz. Am I the only one that gets nervous or tanks in the game? Dave, you must not be looking at the same Twitter I am, because I feel like everyone kind of clinches a little bit when Alexis Diaz comes to the game. So, man, it's brutal. I was when Will hit the walk-off last year, Nelly's first home run game. Yeah, that game was awesome. That was kind of the start of the whole run, right? I feel like they're capable of one of those. I know not having McLean makes everything kind of nerve-wracking there, but especially with what's coming up. I mean, if you look at So this week they had that Rockies series, who the Rockies have played like a little better than their record shows of late. Still not good, but it's pretty solid. Then you come home for the Cubs. You have a really good Guardians team, and then you have the Brewers. But from there, I mean, a lot of winnable games, right? The Pirates, the Red Sox, the Cardinals, that lead you into the Yankees series at the start of July. I think this is your chance to make some games up. You're going to get some guys back. There's a lot to look forward to there. So I'm not giving up yet, and neither should you, right? That's what we're going to go with here. Perfect. All right. So it was brought up earlier, and I want to kind of get into it real quick. And if you're hanging out in the chat, please send some comments. Please send some thoughts. I'll share them all. Like I said, I'm riding solo tonight. So I will, you guys are my co-hosts tonight. So any comments are there. Carrie asked us in the Rocky City of a home run environment. Very much so. Very much so. The altitude there is insane. And you've seen a lot of guys who haven't been able to hit very well throughout their major league career do awfully well there. And I've heard a lot of I've never been to that park, and I hear it's beautiful. So it's going to be really cool. Josh says, if Noelvi and CS come back and it hit, it buys us time for McLean's return. Absolutely. And I think that is the goal at this point, because I don't know what else you can look forward to. So, and Joey Gaditza, TJ totally shapes the lineup up top there. I totally agree. Let's talk about Jake Fraley, guys. What another great day he had today. So the last 7 games, he's been huge for this team. That OPS looks fantastic. Today, 3 for 3 with a double. It's just a couple singles, a walk, and a sacrifice fly. Huge game from him. With him, I think the thing that I really like is his adjustments. So this is a guy who obviously had a really, really tough personal offseason with everything with his family, and then comes into this year, gets the flu, and is kind of getting his groove back. So he leaves today. He leaves the game today when they are heading to Colorado with a 295 batting average. I'm not a batting average guy, but you like to see that. That 725 OPS, I think, is going to keep rising. And like Carrie said, you go to Colorado, a lot of chances to get some homers there. So maybe that power swing's not too far away. That double he had today, that swing looked pretty nice. The sac fly, the swing looked really nice as well. I believe that Jake Fraley's starting to click, and it's going to be something where this I think is going to go really well. Mike says, I do not like the Brewers, even if the Fonz was there. I agree. I can't figure. I think the only reason I don't like them is just because they beat us. Though it's not like I think they're jerks or anything. I kind of really liked how they handled the Tommy Pham thing today. If you guys haven't seen that, check that out. That's a mess. But on Fraley, I think that what we're kind of getting here is just a guy that is consistent, and you're seeing him play baseball consistently. He's not injured. He's not battling anything here. So that's just kind of what's been really awesome to see. And I think the power is going to come. I think his swing is kind of getting back. He's getting that timing down. And I really believe that Fraley is going to be a really huge part of this team for a little while now. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where the season goes from here with him. I feel like a couple homers are coming in these next couple weeks. Back at GABP, you've got this Rocky series. We're going to see some bombs. You go to Pittsburgh. Yeah, homers are coming for Jake Fraley. I really think so. So I wanted to make sure I touched on that and make sure we got some point conversation as well. And Carrie brought up another point. Got a hit against a lefty today. That was pretty sweet. I don't know if I'm not here to say play Jake Fraley every day by any means yet, but I have been pretty impressed with how solid. I wouldn't say good, I wouldn't say great, but I wouldn't say terrible or and his bats against left-handed pitching. Want to keep seeing him get the chances to do so. Obviously, they don't really have a choice with where they are right now. But I'm really, really curious to see how that shakes out. So kudos for Jake Fraley. I've really, really loved what we've seen from him so far this year. Well, these past few weeks. I hope it comes up. I think the power's coming. I don't think it's too far away. On the other end, we do a segment all the time called Ellie is Awesome. And I still believe Ellie is awesome. But I don't think we can ignore the elephant in the room at this point, right? Things haven't been good. And this is where we're at. Petey says, sign Puig to platoon with Benson. Petey, you're my guy. I just don't know if I can lean into that quite yet, but I do appreciate the comment. I think we all could use a little fun in our lives, and I know Yasa Boyk has on occasion brought that, but occasion also brought some headaches. But hey, if it's gonna work, that's fine with me. But I'm not counting on it. Um, let's look at this real quick. So the Ellie thing, we all see it. We're all watching it, and it's been pretty hard. And I think there's some people who are starting to give up on Ellie De La Cruz, which is very silly to me considering he's 22 years old. But I saw today when I brought this point up on X that I referenced, where he's at in his age, and people brought up, well, what about August and September last year, Tim? Yeah, that happens with young players, especially ones that are 22. So this is his last 30 games. It's 193, 276 on base, 263 slugging. If your slugging's lower than your on base, that's normally not a good sign. 22 hits, 11 runs, only one homer, only five runs batted in, 11 walks, 14 stolen bases, but 46 strikeouts. So, look, again, I'm telling you guys stuff that you've already know. You guys see the same things I do. I'm not frustrated that Ellie's struggling, right? That's part of just learning to play baseball at this level. And this is a guy who has always made adjustments and always figured it out, and he's always had runs. John and I are going to talk about in the interview that you guys will hear here in a few minutes. I think that he's going to be great. I think that if you look at who he is and what he's done in the past and where he's been throughout his career, and you look at the tools he has, if Ellie De La Cruz hits 4 of his 5 tools, he's potentially the best player in baseball. That's where his ceiling is. This is being realistic here. But there are growing pains with that. And Chad Dotson, our leader here at the Riverfront, talks about it all the time, guys. It's that there are weeks that Ellie De La Cruz looks like he is the greatest baseball player to ever walk the planet, and there are weeks you have with this. It's just part of the experience. It's part of the growth. This is what we're kind of looking at with him here. So I've seen comments where people have said maybe you move him down the order, or he needs a couple of days off. I thought what Cowboys said today on the broadcast, I have it on my notes here, so bear with me while I pull it up, was something that I've really, really thought a lot about, and it's really kind of frustrated me. Because, yeah, obviously the player deserves to get blamed for their performance. I'm not saying that. But Cowboys said this today before the game. You can blame the player, but the hitting coach and the manager are also there. He didn't get to the big leagues by swinging and missing this much. And I think that's something that people were just kind of being like, this is up to him to figure it out. And yes, it is. But also the fact that his coaching staff has not been like, hey, dude, you're taking this 95-mile-an-hour fastball down the middle once a game. Like, what's going on? Maybe they are, and we're just not hearing about it. Like, so we're not in the clubhouse. But something's not clicking, obviously. And there's no, reports of conversations. There's no he's working on things. There's none of that. It's just like he's going up there and he's like giving away at bats. Today, over 5, 4 strikeouts. Can't have that. Sucks. Do I think he's going to figure this out? Yes, I absolutely do. I think that the people who are panicking are probably haunted by the Billy Hamiltons and the Nick Senzel's, which, by the way, don't look at Nick Senzel's OPS right now. It'll make you really upset he's not a Redleg. But I think that people are panicked by that. And I don't think we're taking into account that Ellie has a higher ceiling than both those guys ever did. I really believe that he's going to be just fine. Kerry said it earlier. He didn't take his offensive struggles with him to the field. He made some really huge defensive plays this weekend at Wrigley that helped the Reds win a couple games and went a long way. And that replay thing last night, excuse my language, I try to clean up the language around here, was sort of bullshit. It makes me hate replay even more. That was so unnecessary. Like today, they get thrown on the base paths on pickoffs twice. Give the guy kudos. He made the pitch. Drew Smiley and Ben Brown both make great plays. Not our Ben Brown. Do not confuse him. He does not need any haters in his tweets. But I think that when you look at what they're at right now, it's really frustrating. And the replay thing absolutely sucks. And that really kind of hurt them a lot. Why do we need to go frame by frame anymore? What's the purpose of this at this point? Who's enjoying this? I don't know. PD says, let's pull this up. Ellie is a young Mickey Mantle with Sean Dustin defense and Billy Hamilton's speed. The slip might be good for Ellie long term as long as his head's in the right place and it seems like Larkin is in his ear. That's true. He also says, it's also true that if your whole team is slumping at the plate, your batting coach is probably not awesome. That's a conversation that definitely needs to be had because The offense we saw in May was horrid. They're second to last now in team batting average, and that's a step up from where they were a couple weeks ago. So, yeah, that's definitely something to say. Spencer Steer was having the most loud outs possible. That's something Ben and I talked about every week. Tyler Stevenson's baseball savant page looks very good, but I think his slash line hasn't necessarily been the best of late as well. I still believe in this team. I still think the offense, they're talented enough to hit, and I think they're going to hit. And you saw that quite a bit. The conversation has been Friedel's back, and that legitimizes a lot of stuff. So I'm not excited to be in last place, but I do feel pretty optimistic with who's all coming back. So that's where we're at here. Let's see. Josh says, when CES and Marte do come back, I think Steer should mostly play second. Get the India, Fraley, Brenson, and Stu platoon going. This is where India is going. Okay. I like this comment a lot. I made a comment today, and maybe it's just a prisoner of the moment, but I've been saying for a couple weeks now, I feel like they may potentially should designate Spencer Steer as the everyday first baseman, as the prominent first baseman. I don't think that this team has an everyday first baseman right now. And what I say by that is not necessarily a knock on CES, because I know he's going to need at-bats. But and maybe it's just because I watched Jeimer Candelario play first base for a couple weeks that was atrocious with snatching balls and picks and things like that and covering the bag. But I just kind of feel like the athleticism Steer has kind of correlates to what could really help this team the most in that situation. Now, second base is definitely possible, especially till McLean comes back. But I don't know. I just kind of feel like the way his athleticism and some of the plays he's made, that diving catch against the Dodgers was sweet. That pick he made today on that LA throw in the ninth inning was awesome. So again, maybe I am prisoner of the moment. You guys can tell if you disagree with me, but I really do kind of feel like maybe I would look at Steer as potentially being the first baseman for the long run for a little while. PD says part of the batting coach's role is to keep folks out of slumps and get them out of slumps, and that has not happened. Yeah. And Josh just say CS actually played a good first base, so maybe. Kerry says I'm starting to feel deja vu from last year, seeing players coming back for the Cavalry. So if you listen to the Riverfront Red show this week, Chad had Doug Gray on from Reds minor leagues, and they discussed this, where they're pretty similar to where they were at last year at this point, but the Cavalry came. I hope that this is what this is, because this is guys coming back from injuries and things like that. So Josh says he's better than what he expected to play anyway. That's true, because when I was down in Louisville, this is CS we're talking about here. I talked to a couple people down there and asked about their thoughts, because the conversation was he was playing corner outfield, corner infield. And I was basically told that they don't know where to put him because he can't play defense anywhere. They just want to get his bat in the lineup. So I'm fine with how he played in first base. I just felt like Steers played a better first base overall the past couple of weeks. And I know someone's going to bring up outs above average, and I know this is going to sound shitty of me. I don't care about outs above average for a first baseman. I don't. Do you cover the bag? Do you field the bag when the ball's thrown to you? Cool. All right, we're fine. Hey, Petey, how about a trade to strengthen the team? Maybe take on some payroll, a righty power on an outfield on a rental contract. I don't know. Tommy Pham might be available again, guys, after today. I'm kidding. I don't want to go through that ever again. Nick says Steer is the most valuable player on the team because of all positions he can play at a good level. I don't love him as an outfielder. I understand that he was there just to get his bat in the lineup, and I thought he did an okay job. Look, you're not going to find a better Spencer Steer fan than me. Yeah, Josh, I am mostly done with India at second, honestly. You're not alone. You're not alone. And they need something to hold them over for the next couple months until they get McLean back in the lineup. And if that's going to be Steer and you're going to have CS at first base, Marte at third, Elliott short, fine. I don't hate it. I'm not anti it by any means. I just felt like I was really impressed with how Steers played first base the last couple weeks. And I know some savant person's going to be really mad at me that I said I don't care about outs above average for a first baseman, but that's just my opinion. You don't have to agree with it. All right, guys. Well, let's get to, before we get to the interview with John, I do want to go to, okay. Carrie asks, is Jacob Hurtubise here to stay? Kind of younger version of TJ. This is a really good question. because he has played far above what I thought he would play. He's been pretty good. I don't know how you keep him on the big league roster, though. I do think he's been fine. He's done a good job. He's been decent. He's been great in the corner outfield as far as fielding. I've been very happy with that. But I just don't know when all these guys come back, where does he fit into the big league roster? Is he your fourth outfielder? Probably, but you still need a right-handed outfielder. Do I rather give him a shot than a Nick Martini, who we've shown consistently is not the one? Yes, I absolutely would. But I don't know where he fits consistently on a day in, day out basis with the big league club. So hopefully something there. A power rating of 20 of 80 for her to be is tough to digest. It is. And Carrie says, good problems to have. These are great problems to have. This is what you want the Redlegs to have. You just want them to have more wins in the win column right now. I do really like him. I root for him. Ben and I had a really lengthy conversation about her to be his last week because I thought he had a really good Dodger series. But yeah, the lack of pop, especially when you play to see like GABP where homers should come easily, though they have not for this team of late, kind of makes it a little bit tough to kind of keep him on the roster with other options. And maybe just a trip to Louisville, maybe it can help him get a little bit of that power swing going. Him and Blake Dunn and those guys. Reese Hines has been killing it still. Maybe that's what they kind of need to do there. So again, great problems to have. I appreciate the questions and the insights. So let's look at, I'm going to bring up the pitching matchups for this Rockies series. We'll talk a little about the Rockies here in a second. So a trip out to the mountains where can heal all hitting wounds. Yeah. Petey, big fan of her to be. It's just not 1,000% sure he is currently one of the 1,000 best baseball players on the planet. That's nail on the head right there. Joey Gaditza, I want to see the Blandino knuckleball eventually. I do too, man. I am team knuckleball for life. So hopefully that does get going. Nick says, I think some of the Bell decisions have cost a few games. Yes. Ben and I had a deep conversation about this recently where there's some things he's done and I'm not fire David Bell. I love David Bell. I am just kind of, I think sometimes he's out coached himself and taken and snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. So I really, really do worry about him there. Let's get to this Rocky series for real quick, guys. So these are favorable matchups for the Reds for as far as pitching goes. But again, it's Coors Field. Anything can happen. We're going to preface this week by saying if the Reds have a starter that gives up 5 runs this week, it's fine. That's Coors Field for you. It's Colorado. Colorado's insane. So I'm kind of keeping an eye out on that. But Monday, you got Andrew Abbott against Ryan Feltner. Tuesday, you've got Frankie Montas versus Ty Blatch. And Wednesday, you have Graham Ashcraft versus Dakota Hudson. Wednesday's obviously getaway day before they come home. Carrie, do you think Abbott and Ashcraft are on short leashes? Abbott, definitely not. I know that he had a bad game against St. Louis, but he's been way too good this year. Ashcraft, this is a conversation that comes up quite a bit. I think a lot of people have talked about in the sense of third time through the order, things kind of go back on him pretty badly. And so I think Graham Ashcraft is a major league pitcher, but I do think we've got to figure something out where if he's going to go 6-7 innings at some point, which no one does in baseball anymore, I understand that. They got to figure out how to make adjustments there. I know Hunter Green had a bad game last night, numbers wise, but the fact he went through all that and still got into the 6th inning through that lengthy rain delay. And I'm not trying to be a Hunter Green apologist here. I've been very happy with his performance this year, obviously, but Ashcraft's got to figure out how to do make that step. Nick Lodolo today he's made that step when he's pitched this year, when he's been back, because he's been battling injury. So I think that, and the competition in this rotation, is not necessarily like other teams. Like we just look at those Rockies numbers that the Reds are facing this week. That's 2023 Reds starting pitching right there compared to 2024 Reds starting pitching, right? Felder with a 5.46, Blatch with a 4.15, Dakota Hudson with a 5.02. There's no Luke Weaver's on this team, right? Which I know someone will pull up. Luke Weaver's had really good numbers for the Yankees for some reason. And there's no, I don't know. Carson Spires might be back up pretty soon. The way he's pitching in Louisville right now, he was awesome the other day. So yeah, Nick right here. Green has been good 4 of 5 games. I don't think he was terrible yesterday. I think he just had an inning where he couldn't locate the strike zone, and then Saya Suzuki took full advantage of it, which is his job. Yeah, Petey, there's no Mike Minor. 1,000% there's no Mike Minor. So that is exactly where this team is at. So as far as Andrew Abbott, no, I think he deserves to start until the wheels fall off. As far as Graham Ashcraft, he's got to learn to make that next adjustment. I think that's his next step. It's just kind of figuring that part out. Joey Gaditza says, Ty has been swinging the bat. Yes, he has. I'm big Ty Stevenson guy, as we know. And then, yes, Nick Green has had no run support. He did have 4 runs yesterday. So 99% of the time, you're right. But yesterday, he definitely had the opportunity to put a game away. Dave, I'm always game for Ricky Karcher saves. Best tops now. Is he in Arizona system now? I think so. Gosh, man. I think that guy is just like, Immaculate Grid has the section. It's the play for one team. For the time being, Ricky Karcher might actually be a high percentage call because of nerds like us. So I certainly hope so for his sake to kind of keep his popularity going. Joey says, did I see correctly Alex Young was optioned? You are correct. Alex Young was optioned today. That was kind of surprising to me. I do like Justin Wilson. I think he's been better than his records. Was he put on the IL today? I can't remember all the moves. I should have this. I went to the Florence Y'alls game today with my daughter, and it was her first time going to one of those games. It was pretty awesome. Ricky Karcher is next week's Strickland. That's pretty funny. All right, guys. Well, so this was kind of easy for me. I kind of took a half hour here, just kind of catch up and answer some questions I appreciate. So I am going to go ahead and put on the Sadak interview, but I'll be here in the chat if anyone has any comments or anything. So I'll respond. It's about 45 minutes long. We talk about basically everything from baseball to best food spots in Chicago. So I hope you guys like it. Let me know. Like I said, any comments you have on there, I'll be in the chat. So let's check it out. But here's me. We'll talk with one of my favorite human beings alive. TV Sport Voices Cincinnati Reds, John Sadak. All right, folks, joining me here, my good friend and yours, TV Voices Cincinnati Reds. You can check him out on all home games, on all home and away games, I should say, on Bally Sports Ohio. John Sadak. Welcome back to the show, man. It's been too long.
No, thank you for having me. Yeah, it has been. I wanted my Tim Daniel fix, and I'm glad that you reached out. We were able to connect this way. I miss you, dude.
I miss you too, man. I miss you. I got to have that great time with you in Cleveland last September. We got to have some coffee and catch up. You're one of my favorite people in the world, not just talk baseball, but life with, and you give great advice on being a dad. So I always love when I get to chat with you, man.
Oh, likewise. And all I do is share what people far smarter and more helpful than me have shared with me over the years.
Yeah, that's my goal to do that. So I'm just going to keep it going. So John, I definitely obviously have you on to talk about the ball club and everything going on there, but I want to start in a different direction just because of your history in broadcasting, obviously, and growing up in the Northeast. So the sports world this week unfortunately lost the legend Bill Walton, 71 years young. And I say young because his personality was as young as it gets. And just kind of curious for you as a broadcaster, I thought you would really have an intel on this, just kind of how you'll look back on his legacy, because I watched Dan Patrick yesterday and he talked about one of the guys who works with him is like my age. And he's like, had to explain to him he was a basketball player before he was a broadcaster. And I feel like he's kind of has that legacy depending on the generation, where some know him as the NBA MVP, some know him as the sixth man and NBA champion with the Celtics, and some know him as the hilarious broadcaster. So for you, how do you look back at the legacy of Bill Walton, not just as a sports fan, but just like the most entertaining human being potentially alive to cover sports?
Yeah, my first impressions of him, based upon my age, were more his Celtics time. Laying on the floor, spinning the towel because he had the back problems, and as the years went on, I got to learn more about his dominance at UCLA and his earlier NBA life in Portland, and I did games at Princeton for many years, and one of his sons played at Princeton, so there's a lot of overlap with some of the people that were there. one of my best friends who succeeded me doing the Princeton games got to have a long series of one-on-ones with him. One of my closer friends among play-by-play guys is Jason Benetti, who famously has not only did a lot of hoops with him, but they did that White Sox series of innings together as well. But I think the most deeply rooted Bill Walton thoughts for me, we would do mock game calls or talk show segments with my college friends where we were driving to and from student broadcasts we were doing. Went to a Division III school in New Jersey. The average opponent in conference was probably about an hour and a half to 2 hour drive away. We were the southernmost team in that league, and we would just make each other laugh. And we would do one of my favorite trios of a booth, of a three-man booth, was when Marv Albert was with Steve Snapper Jones and Bill Walton. And Bill would say some outrageous, crazy things sometimes, and Snapper would call him out on it on the air. But Bill's retort to it was hilarious, and so we would just make up these crazy scenarios that would happen, and we would wildly laugh. I think Bill. I did the Pac-12 tournament for a couple of years on radio with PJ Carlissimo and Bill would be on TV. He would usually be with Ted Robinson, and so there were multiple times in like the earlier games, like quarterfinals, where we'd be sitting near or right next to each other and be able to interact. A super funny, curious man who loved life. Like that's my impression. That's everybody I met. Randy Cross is my football partner for college football, doing mostly the Navy games at CBS Sports Network. He's a UCLA guy. He and Bill had crossed paths while they were there and many other times in life as, pro athletes and then media figures thereafter. Just his joyous sharing of life with everyone. I think the man, he lit up when he could light somebody else up in some way. And I think that kind of curiosity and silliness and fun-loving nature is something that we could all use more of in this world. I think he'll be fondly remembered for that.
I completely agree. I love athlete podcasts. I'm a sucker for all of them. And so I listen to a lot to Road Trippin', which is Richard Jefferson and Channing Frye, the Pac-12 roots. So of course, Richard played with Luke at Arizona. They became best friends. So there was an episode in 2017. They had Bill Walton on, and they replayed it yesterday in tribute as like on their feed. And it's just so funny because, you ask him a 2 or 3 word question. He goes like, "Oh, Richard, remember when you and Luke were at Arizona and you guys were having such a great time and you had that house was so fantastic." And it's just, him just like going on his run. That's a terrible impersonation of him, by the way. So please don't hold that against me. But yeah, I definitely agree. And I thought I'm really glad I got to get your intel there. Let's get to it because this is your 4th year now covering the team, and you've really become such a part of the Reds community and culture so well. And you're not just on TV anymore. So, you are obviously, but when the Reds have had a uptick more in primetime games coming off last year, this year, obviously being on Fox and things like that. And you've had the experience now where we've gotten to see you kind of be one of us in these games. You've gotten to live tweet some games from your couch and just share your thoughts on things. I loved during the Rangers game when you were talking about Hunter's dominant start, and I definitely want to talk to you about Hunter Green at some point in this interview. But how much have you really enjoyed I know you love being in the ballpark. I know you love doing the games, but how much have you kind of enjoyed also having that side for a couple days here and there?
Yeah, it is fun. It's to be honest, a day off now and then is not a bad thing.
Sure.
And I also think viewing a Reds game through the lens of someone else, and what do they see? What do they highlight? What are they curious about? What are their interpretations of things? I learn from that. And then not only do I learn directly from what they share and how they share it, but sometimes that triggers a thought in me of, well, let me go down this rabbit hole, or let me ask this person about this. And that most of us, I can't definitively say all, but I think the vast majority that wind up in some kind of a position like the one that I'm in, we're sports fans. Like that's how you start. So just watching the game, and that's what social media allows us to do today. It's kind of like you're just watching the game with your friends, like you're just shouting stuff out at the TV while stuff's going, and that's essentially what I'm able to do in that side by side viewing experience. And I really enjoy it. It feels incredibly interactive and fun. There's a certain part of me that would like on some of those times to be at the stadium. However, I'm away from my family so much that it allows me to kind of, scratch both itches and to be a little more present for them. Because if I, don't tweet for like 5 minutes, who cares? My daughter wants to show me something or hang out with me, and then I can share that experience with her that she can watch with me and kind of learn as I react to things or she asks questions about it. But it's been really neat. And ultimately, I think you underscored the biggest thing is that because there was such optimism for this Reds team, and because they have some star power, particularly with Ellie, there is a greater national interest, and that's a good problem to have. Like once you start appearing on more national games, and so I don't work as much. I don't love that necessarily outside of the occasional off day, but it's good for everything else. It means that like you're moving forward in a positive way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of the big thing. So obviously it's been tough year, and it's not gone the way any of us thought it was going to go. And there's so many factors there. I know you've said in the past when I talked to you, I mean, you had a 100 loss season here already, and you still kept your head high, and you still said like that my worst day here is better than my best day wherever I was before. But I'm starting to see more of, I really have enjoyed your broadcasting this year when, they are on these slumps and it's like something doesn't go their way. They give up a home run or something, and you're like, and that's a bomb. And they're like yesterday in the St. Louis game, there's a couple of those. And I think it's been really cool because it feels like you're like feeling what we're feeling. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to intrinsically know what anyone else is feeling, but yeah, I mean, it's a season that was built on such optimism, coming off an unexpected year, where I think even in the moment we were, I think, aware enough to realize they were ahead of schedule. I didn't expect last year to happen the way that it did. I did think a bunch of young players were going to come up, and I thought that some of them were going to perform incredibly well. I did not think that the hit rate on who performed well would be nearly as high as it was, because that just doesn't really happen in baseball. And I did expect that this year we would see some sophomore slumps. Some players, some perhaps unexpected, would take a step back. And it doesn't mean that they're terrible, and it doesn't mean that they can't be a good player, but baseball's hard and the league makes adjustments. What I never forecasted was that the critical level of injury that happened to this team. And it's hard to dissociate, right? I mean, because like there was so much, I think, deserved excitement and hype about this team. And the players themselves are outright talking about winning the division and going to the playoffs, which is a good thing. I want them to think and believe that, and they should, based upon the merits of last year. But baseball is a long grind of a season, and when blunt reality comes, and the offense has been wanting for weeks at a time, that's a significant challenge.
Yeah, the thing that Ben, my co-host, always says is it's the most unforgiving sport possible. And you're starting to see a lot of that this year with this team. And I think that's what's kind of jumped out. I'm trying to figure out the best. Let's go the happy side of things first, because that's what we need in this world, right? We got to channel our Bill Walton here. The rotation has been, for the most part, tremendous. And when Nick Lodolo's been in there, he's been competitive. I know he hasn't had as many starts as we all like. And Graham Ashcraft, I know his ERA says one thing, his games look a little different. And obviously, this maturation and this growth of Hunter Green this past month has been something that's been unbelievable. I knew he was going to be better. I knew he was going to grow. But to see how much where he was off in April to where he's now using a pitch he just learned, he's just started using in spring training to strike out the best hitter in baseball twice. You talk about things you couldn't predict. I thought Hunter Green was going to be really good this year, but potential National League All-Star, and if the Reds had about one more games, maybe we're talking like in the Cy Young candidacy. Did not expect that.
Yeah, I mean, I would totally agree. I mean, the rotation has been the bedrock, and that's, I mean, and how crazy this sport is. The rotation was one of the worst things about last year's team.
Yeah.
I mean, they were 28th or 29th in almost every major category for starting pitching. A big asterisk to that, it was a lot of journeymen were filling in a number of spot starts because of a variety of injuries that the team had. But at the same time, I mean, you start who you start. All the games count, and that's what the numbers were. So the turnaround in a fairly compressed amount of time is impressive and is a big deal, because that's the core of what will ultimately lead to winning. You need to have the pitching foundation first. And I would also echo that, yes, I think Hunter's growth has been the most spectacular, the biggest, and for some reason, among certain members of the fan base, the most unnoticed. Like I can't tell you how many times I come across fans who bring up Hunter's name and they act like, well, is he doing okay? What do you think? What do I think? Have you been watching for the last month? The guy's been dominating. Like he's going 6+ regularly. He's found a way to be able to lengthen himself out. He's hitting spots with incredible precision. I think he looks amazing. I mean, this is about as good as he's looked. And in large part because it's also so projectable, because it's not, I don't know that he was ever necessarily specifically chasing strikeouts, but I think the common issue you see with flame-throwing young pitchers is that they come out with max effort a lot. I'm in the big leagues. I'm going to show what I can do, and I'm also going to try to get these guys out to try to help the team. And it can take a while for that, accordion of life to kind of realize that sometimes less is more. And not only to realize it, but then to execute it. Because when that's been your identity, that's worked for you at every level, but now you have to pitch distances of time and innings that you've never gone to before. That's a real thing. And I think most young pitchers go through that. I think the split has been an incredible addition for him. And I would also say, and I'm curious what Hunter would say if we were to ask him this directly. And I think it's best done at least at the All-Star break, maybe closer to the back end of the year, when we can truly evaluate what his year has been like. I think Frankie Montas has been a big part of that. I mean, he is constantly talking pitching. Frankie's performance after the first two starts has not been as strong as I think many would have hoped or have thought. I think he's been able to grind these last two, but I think his focus and effort level, and moreover, the conversations that he has with the rest of that group. I mean, how many times it seems like every shot we show of a starting pitcher in the dugout, they're all together. They're all engaged with each other. They're all watching and talking. And watch other teams. That doesn't necessarily happen with every other team. I think it's a big deal. And I also think, I know his last start, we're talking here on Thursday off day. Andrew Abbott's last start was perhaps his worst of the year, certainly by the finish of it. His season has been excellent. And while his strikeout numbers are down, he similarly, I think, is finding more creative, repeatable ways to get guys out. He reads hitters probably as well as anybody who's in this rotation. I think what Derek Johnson and Alon Leichman and the entire pitching staff and the catchers too, I do think that's an under-the-radar element. The improvement of Tyler Stevenson in his framing and his pitch sequencing. I think Luke Maile has already shown that he has that, that veteran experience and feel for that. But that duo has been a huge, huge part of it. I think they deserve a decent amount of credit as well for what's happened with this rotation.
You literally took the next question out of my mouth. I was going to ask you about Tyler Stevenson and his growth behind the plate, and I think how much that's really helped. And starting to see more of that hitting again, kind of seeing, an extra year removed from the collarbone injury and the 2022 season when he was really injury plagued. And I always felt last year was an underlier. I didn't think that's who he was. I felt like it was a lot of just getting his legs back underneath him. And he's definitely had slumps this year. I'm not going to say he's been tremendous, but he's also amongst the best in baseball at barrel and hard hit percentage. And I think when you looked at Steer's struggles too, that he was having, he was still making contact. It wasn't like he was striking out 3-4 times a game. So with guys like that and kind of seeing where they're growing, what's really kind of jumped out to you the most about guys like Stevenson and Steer? And obviously I know we're going to have a lengthy Ellie De La Cruz conversation at some point.
Well, with Tyler Stevenson, the work he did early January, he arrived in Arizona, way in advance of traditional report for spring training. And he and Joe Singley was the bullpen catcher. They had first connected over Instagram a couple of years ago, and it was Tyler that helped bring him onto the staff. He was a collegiate catcher himself. He does a lot of consulting work with other top-tier amateur and pro catchers throughout the country. And J.R. House, who spearheads all of that, catching development for the Reds. He worked his butt off. I mean, I've been shown videos of some of the work that he's done, and the videos to kind of show example and kind of the finish that they want, and the stats kind of bear that out. Like he he has gone from, I think he finished third or fourth worst in savant framing last year among catchers, to there are times he's been top 10. Now, I would caution an asterisk. Framing doesn't kind of like defensive run saved and outs above average. They're good guidelines along the way, but they don't really have a ton of weight until you have a very large sample size. You kind of need a season. So he's fluctuated some, but he's been in the top half the entire year. That's a big difference and a big change. And I think, I mean, while there's never been anything confirmed or said about the pairings of pitcher and catcher, Stevenson this year is catching everybody. And we didn't always see that. And I have to think there's some kind of correlation there, right? There's some kind of connectivity that, and I think the pitching numbers, if you want to look at catching ERA and what team record is, has also seen market improvement. And I think all of that goes lock in step because there is such a synergy to that. And I would echo what you're saying at the plate. I mean, he's hitting the ball a lot harder. That's clearly with purpose. Most of it has been up the middle. Beginning of the year, we were seeing a lot of pulled ground balls that were mostly handled. And I think that adjustment has been made in season. I also think, though, that those are both Steer and Stevenson are probably the two Reds that seem to be most affected by what appears to be the more challenging offensive season for the sport in several years. Slug year over year, March, April, and all of baseball was down 20 points. I saw a piece the other day that said it was talking about Bellinger and how his numbers are down, but compared to league average, he's almost exactly where he was last year.
Yeah.
The average OPS drop is like 40 points. And I feel like those are the two guys who, not as much lately, but definitely over the first month plus of the year, we're getting, a combination of exit velo and launch angle and just plain eye test. I mean, just watching the swing and hearing the contact that you thought home run or off the wall, and they're being caught at the warning track. So I do think they've been burned by that some, and I do wonder if, as this year goes on, if that's something that's happening, whether it's the baseball or something else that's creating that, does the contact have to be more gapping down the line? Like, is the ball just not going to jump the same way to center for most hitters? I mean, take a look at like the bottom 30, 40 qualifiers in slug. There's some huge names there. I mean, like big stars are having a really hard time delivering the ball for true power. And I don't think they're mishitting the ball. I don't think they're failing to square it up. It just seems like it's not jumping quite the same way night to night. And I think with Spencer, he is as steady and as predictable a swinger as there is on this team. It's something Barry Larkin shares all the time, both on the air and off. He just marvels at how flat his swing is, his balance, the way he keeps his head still, something that Chris Welsh talks about all the time too. And that's where it's kind of surprising when he has the ruts that he does. He's probably been the bad luck Red of this year.
For sure.
I don't think most of his at-bats, he doesn't look overwhelmed. It doesn't look like there's some giant hole in his swing. He generally makes contact, and it's way more often outs than it used to be, certainly last year. But yeah, I think both, for the most part, have been very steady swingers that I think have at the least maintained, if not trying to take that next step. And there's still a long season left. I mean, we only just passed the 1/3 mark of the year. Hopefully, as the weather warms, some of that same contact could jump a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of the big thing. Everyone's focused on May, and understandably, it's the moment, it's where we're at. And it obviously, you knew going into the season when you looked at the schedule, you're like, that's brutal. That's tough. But even with where this team's at, with being in the cellar of the division and being a couple games behind Pittsburgh to get out of there, run differential is still awfully close. It's not like this team is losing 7-1 and 9-3. It's these one-run games that you guys have echoed so much in the broadcast. So I think when we look at this thing where everyone's so frustrated and so upset, and I get it. I totally get it. We all want to see them win more. I think throwing the season in just because of this, like the metrics kind of say, like, don't count them out just yet, especially like you said. We still have about, 90, 100 more of these things to go?
Yeah, it's curious that you bring up the run differential thing. It's one of the first things that Nick Kroll has talked about when I've spoken with him about the year to this point, and he would echo the exact same thing because that's something that teams would look at. Um, I also think that because there's so much potential with the head-to-head competition in division, and that's where this team still has potential to really make its own mark.
For
I
sure.
mean, the Reds, the entire time I've been sitting in that play-by-play chair. Reds have had a really hard time with Milwaukee. Milwaukee is one of the teams that's kind of had their number. And it looks like, despite losing some significant names, Milwaukee is pretty much Milwaukee still, even though you would have predicted a significant drop in rotation. They're without Devin Williams for the first couple of months of the year. But they've performed at a fairly high level for most of the season to this point. If you can hang with them head to head, you can make up ground.
For sure.
And that's probably the thing that held the Reds back the most last year and in 21 among my years. So yes, I do think there is a lot of time left. I also think they're going to get some help, hopefully in the next month, because Noel V. Marte would be eligible that St. Louis series to close June the 27th. And I would guess that CES is back right around the same time. He's supposed to be reevaluated on the 5th this coming week. And then once they can get a baseline scan and see where he's at with the hand, they can make a plan in terms of a possible rehab and a return. Those are two significant hitters because, when you speak of May specifically, one of the many things that jumps out is the pitching's keeping them in games. That's part of why they're as close as they are. It's the offense right now that's been wanting, and I think particularly with power. You haven't seen guys get on at quite the same rate. It's been very jagged in terms of the way they've worked at bats. There was a long stretch during this more daunting part of the schedule where there were a number of starters for other teams that don't have great stuff, don't have great backs of the baseball cards, are not bad, but are not amazing, that were incredibly efficient. A lot of them pitching backwards, a lot of it with soft early, breaking ball changeup early, and long lines of consecutive and retired. I mean, guys getting through 5-6 innings on high 40 to low 60 something pitches, which allows the bullpen within series to use its best arms as often as possible. And then the Reds, to their credit, they haven't been the Rally Reds of last year that have had these epic comebacks and won. But a lot of these close games, these 1 and 2 run games, the Reds have kind of been lifeless offensively for 6 to 7 innings and then come to life. We saw it against St. Louis yesterday.
Yeah.
3 runs they scored were in the last 3 innings of the game, and they had a chance to bring the winning run to the plate. That formula has played out a lot. And I do think, yes, obviously the biggest issues are Matt McLain I think was their best player last year, profiled as their best player this year. Ellie's ceiling is higher. When Ellie plays peak Ellie, I don't know. There are very few people in the entire sport that can do what he can do. But he's 22 and he's in his second full year of pro ball. And McLain might have had some of his own regression. If he were healthy right out of the gate, he might not be the exact same version he was. In fact, probably not, because the sport's really hard. But he's a darn good player. and I think the loss of him and Marte and Friedel, also because you're losing a core of what you're doing up the middle. I mean, most of the most successful teams in baseball, the entire time that I've been watching, will repeatedly dictate the mantra of you have to be built up the middle, both offensively and defensively. And Friedel was their war leader and their a strong defender in center, and a lefty that could hit lefties well. And lefties have given this Reds team problems off and on for the entire time that I've been in the play-by-play chair. And McLain, I think, profiles as a silver slugger, Gold Glove caliber second baseman. He can play short, but I think the Reds' long-term future for him is as one of the leading, if not the best, second baseman in the game.
I completely agree with you, and that's I really appreciate you said that. You mentioned Ellie, and I wanted to kind of bring this up because obviously he's under the biggest microscope, right? It's the number one prospect in baseball, the most exciting player in the world. He's in commercials. He's got the Jordan deal. And there is nothing like getting to watch Ellie De La Cruz on a day-to-day basis. I was too young for Eric Davis. So when people tell me about how great Eric Davis was, I got Baltimore, come back to the Reds, San Francisco, St. Louis, Eric Davis. I did not get Eric the Red 40-40, 44 Magnum guy, which I wish I did. He's one of my favorite people to watch highlights of. But for Ellie, I think, when you go through all this stuff, and like you said, his peak, he's incredibly fun, but his valleys are tough. And you mentioned the point, 22-year-old in the big leagues. This is also a guy who's figured out everywhere. Kind of curious your thoughts on this comparison, because I like playing this game with you. We've done this in the past. Andrew Williams from the Riverfront Slack brought the point up the other day about Ellie that whenever people just talk about when he goes through these stretches, Bryce Harper went through those same things and also got called up very young. Baseball's very unforgiving. Baseball's hard. This is like the theme of this conversation here. And that turned out okay, right? I think Philadelphia is pretty much all right with what he's doing. Do you kind of see that comparison there in the sense of, I'm not saying Ellie he might be better than Bryce Harper actually if he puts all his tools together, but do you kind of see that comparison there in the sense of like, obviously it's just relax. He's 22. He's going to have these moments, but also like, this is nowhere near the finished product.
Yes. Yeah. For me, I spent 5 years in the Yankee farm system, and I was their AAA team. They won the AAA title. One of the years, the outright overall AAA title. The other year, they went to their league finals, and it was the core of basically the Yankees that are there now. Gleyber Torres, with Luis Severino, Gary Sanchez. The star player of that group was Aaron Judge, and Judge, like Ellie, is a super tall, abnormally tall, very strong, incredibly physically gifted player. And Judge, as he advanced level to level within the minors, and he was older because he was a college player, it would take him about 200 plate appearances to really click. And I think the Yankees were essentially aware of that internally. It was not something they would publicly announce, but yeah, like he's gonna take his lumps as he adjusts to the level. And he's going to get pitched in a certain way. Who's generally breaking ball down and away. That would be the finisher. And he's going to chase. And then around 200 plate appearances, it's going to click and next level, and then click and then next level. And then the curiosity was what's going to happen when he gets to the big leagues. Like the big leagues is the ultimate, adjuster. But then there's no other level to go. And he's become an MVP, and he's on his way to another MVP season now after he went through a long rut of being terrible. I mean, this season he had like a 3-week rut where he looked god awful and was getting booed on a regular basis. It was hitting in the 170s and striking out all the time. And now he's assembled another 2.5 week span where he looks like the best player on the planet. I think there's a lot of comps there for Ellie. I really do. I think Ellie, the one number we shared that we got from one of our stat resources during the week, is that Ellie sees, let me make sure I get this right, at the time at least, and this may have changed since, the 4th fewest pitches in the zone of any hitter in baseball. And 1-2 were Bryce Harper and Marcell Ozuna for rather obvious reasons. That tells you some about how hard he's being pitched. Because, watch the at-bats. They're not throwing the ball 5 feet outside. Like when they're missing, they're missing like super close. I actually think his feel for the zone has been exceptional. I think he's made a really major adjustment in that regard. There are going to be some times, and we've seen it, where he'll chase breaking ball down. Like it's going to happen. I also would say that happens in part because he gets burned on low called strikes that are below his knee. They're like nearly mid shin, an abnormal amount of the time. In similar fashion to what Judge has dealt with and what Giancarlo Stanton has dealt with. There aren't many guys who are that tall that hit in a Major League Baseball. I would imagine that O'Neal Cruz probably suffers a lot of the same stuff. And of course, there's a lot of comps there because a lot of the tools overlap between those two and their age. And I think with Ellie, there's always this chicken and the egg kind of conundrum of he needs to consistently demonstrate a really savvy knowledge of the zone to, as a taller guy, the umpires to be more aware of that. Because umpires are human, and I think it's hard to see. I don't think they're trying to screw him. They're calling what they see. But I think he is such an exception because of where he is physically that I do think there almost has to be this recognition when he steps in. I need to be more aware in this part, because that's how like this guy is built and what the zone is like. And I think how do you do that? How do you prove that you have this really strong feel of the zone that that you're not that it gets called in your favor, not that you're not looking for the reverse Maddox treatment or stuff that Joey got from time to time. I mean, there'd be pitches that were strikes that Joey didn't swing at, that would be called balls, and I have to think that was a respect factor because his eye was amazing. But just to be called fairly, to make it a truly even competition, and I also think that you're exactly right when you use the term microscope. Like, there is such an increased weight on Ellie. That I think he welcomes. I mean, he is a fierce competitor. He loves playing. He wants to help his team win. He wants to be successful. I think he does a lot of work to that end. But there is also a brutal reality to being a 22-year-old on a team that is a great example of the fragility of a smaller market club, because they've been ravaged by the handful of injuries that have affected them in a way that probably doesn't happen to the Dodgers or the Red Sox or the Yankees or the Cubs, because they're, in case of emergency, break glass options are just bluntly better, or they have enough inventory or the money willingness to just go add a patch that you can't do. So when all those things kind of coalesce together, that's a lot, it's and I think we're going to see that other, giant surge come. I don't have data to back this up. This is more anecdotal. I feel like each time he's gone on a big surge, the first thing we see is the walks start to pop up again. And as the walks pop up again, then I do think there's, he's a human being. I think the confidence swells. I think the ball starts to look bigger. I think there's a greater commanded feel, and I think he just wreaks more havoc. And we just in the last week, we've started to see the walks come up a little bit more. So I do think that is coming. I also think, there are many complexities to this game, and, the hitting side is only part of it for him. Defensively, there have been huge advances. And it's something Barry Larkin has spoken about at great length on and off the air. The mental acuity and decision making, the footwork, the ability to throttle his throwing appropriate to the runner. Mason Wynn was just in town with the Cardinals. Mason Wynn and O'Neal Cruz of the Pirates are 1-2 in arm strength among infielders in baseball. I have zero doubt if Mason Wynn, O'Neal Cruz, and Elly De La Cruz were to be in a throwing competition, that Elly would more than hold his own with that trio. They would be at least very, very similar, if Elly would not win the whole darn thing. But Elly has realized, as he's been in the big leagues now for a year plus, I don't have to throw at 98 miles an hour. Let me read the runner and the situation, and let me throw a catchable ball to make sure that the first baseman can handle it, get the guy out, and limit injury risk to myself. That was one observation that Larkin made during the Cardinals series. Wynn had a throw that was like in the low to mid 80s that got a runner by several steps, and immediately after the play, he starts rubbing his bicep. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, but in the aggregate, because this is a grind and there's so many games, that's a big deal. And there's a lot of time and effort and mental and physical focus that goes into that, let alone what he's done on the base paths as by far the most accomplished base stealer in the sport right now. You're on pace still for a 90-something steal season. And there is a physical taxation to that. I mean, Lark, after one of his 50 steal years, he'll share with us that he felt like he was constantly running. Like every time he got on base, he felt like he was running. And that does take a physical toll on you as the year goes on. And Elly is running at nearly double that rate. And he doesn't get on base as often. So think about how often he's running when he's on.
Right.
Right? Like, because that's one of the other stats that has really jumped out for him is that the frequency at which he is going and successful in ratio to how many times he's on base, like it makes him all the more incredibly impressive because he's basically going every time and teams can't stop him. So I think there's so high a ceiling. There's so much potential. I love the idea of the Harper analogy. And I would imagine if we look at the super young player that has come in, especially that has been super physically toolsy and physically different than his peers, we're probably going to see those same kind of issues. I mean, heck, just as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about Julio Rodriguez, who in back-to-back years, the first month plus, has been a pretty mediocre player. Last year, it was right around this time, he became one of the best players in the sport. And it looks like he's doing it again for Seattle. So I think there's a long game when it comes to young phenom players, and I think Ellie very much fits in that group.
Yeah, I really love Julio Rodriguez, except when he plays defense against the Reds. Then I'm not a big fan. Otherwise, I love him. So, well, you're in Chicago. Obviously, we're recording this. This will go up Sunday, but we're recording this before the series, so I don't want to take too much more of your day. But I do have two things I want to end on before we get out of here. Give me your food spot in Chicago, man. Are you a Portillo's guy? Are you like a pizza dude? What is the Chicago food stop for you when you guys are in town?
Oh, there's so many. I love this town in the summer. Cowboy is a huge fan of Joe's Seafood and Steaks. We went there last night with Tommy. I did not grow up a big seafood guy, even though I live near the ocean. And Cowboy has introduced me to the Dover sole there, which is otherworldly. The king crab legs Tommy and I shared were absolutely delicious. There's a steak joint called Maple and Ash that is just spectacular that I really, really enjoy. There's some great bar scene, some awesome Irish pubs. There's a piano bar where some of it's just like pub food kind of stuff, but I love the environment. I love the people. I love the conversation. And I still have things on my list to go check off. So as we're recording this, it's an off day. We're going to go see a comedy show tonight. It'll be my first time going to Second City, and nice. I'm really excited about it. And Tommy has found some new place that's kind of sort of on the way that we're going to try out tonight. But just a stellar food town. I mean, there's honestly like 40, 50 places that I've done during my trips to Chicago over the years. Although, Tim, I'd never been here in the summer before this job. I'd always been here in the winter. I did some fill-in Bulls games years ago. I've been here for college events. Chicago in the summer is fantastic.
So much different. It's such a different town. I've been, my aunt used to live in the burbs, so I've been in both seasons as well. I've been during Christmas time, which is really pretty, but also I've been like we're in the situation you are in now, where at that point of the year. All right, well, my last question, because I feel like this is the most important one I have to ask you as someone who, as you can see behind me, very much loves professional basketball. You guys have been advertising the Thomas Rhett concert because of the charity purpose, and I respect that, obviously, and you should do that. But where's your excitement level for one DJ Diesel's appearance at Great American Ballpark this summer? And how can we make sure he gets in the booth for an inning or two with you guys?
Oh my gosh, sign me up for a Shack Attack anytime we can do it. I mean, I would just adore that. Very high. I think there will be incredible fun. He is a funny dude. There'll be a lot of sweating, I'm sure. That's in August, right?
Yes, it's the last day of August.
So I want to make sure, because the many of the concerts are overlapping. We are home that day. That's a post-game concert.
I believe it is the Saturday Brewers game, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, because Friday's a doubleheader now because of the makeup. So
that's right, and I think yes. I'm very excited. Are you going to be going?
Oh, dude, I can't miss that. I can't miss that. I mean, I know he doesn't do I Know I Got Skills anymore, but just in the slight chance it pops up in his set,
I really hope and pray that we can find a way for Inside the NBA to still exist.
Oh my gosh, I was going to ask you about that.
That's one of the greatest studio shows in all the sport. I think it's become the best. For me, a decade plus ago when Fowler was still hosting and Corso was prime Corso, I think College Game Day was my number one. And I still like College Game Day, but not as much. And Inside the NBA has just hit new levels of virtuoso greatness. Their bluntness with like the player and the sport and with each other. And they can take a bad, crappy NBA game. Some of them can be. And make it fun. Like, I don't even need to see the game. Like, let me just watch the studio show.
There was one this year. I remember. You bring it up? Reminds me. It was like a Thursday night, and who was it? It was the Bulls and the Raptors, and they're going to commercial, and you hear Barkley go, "Watch the game, guys! Even though it's the Bulls and the Raptors, watch the game." Just. As someone who spent this season covering the Bulls and had to watch them on a nightly basis, I very much appreciated that. So, well, man, thank you again. I yeah, it just gave me more time than I asked for, so I'm very grateful as always. And I hope you have a great time in Chicago. Hopefully, the series by the time this show airs on Sunday is a good one, and we're celebrating some wins. But as always, where can people find John Sadak to talk to him during the season? Because I know you love your fan interactions.
At John Sadak on Twitter. One word altogether, JOHNSADAK. John.Sadak at Instagram. And anytime you see me at the ballpark, feel free to say hey.
Absolutely. Well, John, my friend, always a pleasure.
Great to be with you, Tim.
All right. Once again, I want to say thanks to John for giving me 40 minutes of great conversation there about the ball club. With that being said, I'm going to go and wrap this week's episode up of Late Night Reds. Thank you all for hanging out for nearly an hour and a half today. I really appreciate it as always. So, hey, I want to make sure I shout this out. Fun week of Riverfront media this week. So obviously we've got me here, Late Night Reds. Tuesday this week on this same RSS feed, if you're listening to it on a podcast or this YouTube channel, Redleg Roundtable, Seth Shaner has the Hall of Famer, Marty Brenneman on. Marty's going to come on. They're going to talk life and talk about everything that has to do with his time covering the Reds. So be sure to check that out. Seth had a really, really great, lengthy conversation with Marty about life and everything there. So that's really fun. As always, you can check out Riverfront Red Show with Chad and Nate when Nate doesn't leave the country on us and leave us to try to scramble to keep this thing together. It's definitely appreciated. NBA happy hour is going to be on Wednesday night this week because of the NBA finals on Thursday. So you can come here and just exact channel myself, Sean, and hopefully Parker talking about the Celtics and the Mavs series. I'm really excited for the series. And then, of course, check out Welcome to the Jungle with Joe and Parker, getting you ready for the Bengals season. We're getting closer and closer to camp time. So I'm going to go and wrap up there. Thank you all for an awesome night. Have a good one, and I will see you all next week. And hopefully Ben's back. I don't know. Isaac might get another D1 offer somewhere. It's been awesome to see. Take it easy, everybody.